Gents, we spoke briefly about the ladder before. This tight season and how it keeps evolving. It's hard to know who are the real contenders and who aren't the contenders, I guess. But Christian, there are a few teams of interest coming out of round 22. I think I've pinpointed here, Sydney, Hawthorn. The Cats are defying their age again, and the Giants as well, who we've sort of touched on. Let's start with the Hawks, because they're a really exciting team to watch. They're probably the best team to watch in the competition. They're running teams off their legs. We saw what they did to Carlton on the weekend. I mean, what can you tell us about the Hawks and what they're doing? How are they doing what they're doing right now?
They're doing it perfectly, almost, to put it succinctly. So since round 11 onwards, they're second for points for and number one for points against. So it's a very easy way to sum up. Great at scoring, you can't score against them.
Just a solid profile.
So they've been the best team in the competition since that point, you'd say?
Yeah, I think so. I think, Brisbane was probably up there, a bit of a disappointing loss. And then Hawthorn would have been, second up until last week, and then probably Hawthorn's overtaken them with that performance. But you talk about the ways you can score, and we've spoken about Collingwood not being a huge clearance team, or Carlton sort of last year making a prelim and sort of struggling on the turnover game. So there's always, even the best teams might have to sacrifice a little bit of their game to make the other part of their game more dominant and sort of get themselves to the top of the ladder. Hawthorn haven't sort of had to struggle with that. So if you look at the five sort of ways you can score, four main ways you can score, from a kick in, a turnover, and a clearance are the three main, and then we sort of split clearances up to centre bounce clearances, which is obviously with the 6-6-6 rule, a very looking field setup. So outscoring your opposition from kick-ins, they're number one, so plus 5 points per game from kick-ins. You don't get a lot of scores from kick-ins, but number one for outscoring their opposition from kick-ins. Second best team at outscoring their opposition from turnovers. Number one for outscoring their opposition from clearances, and then stripping it back to centre bounce clearances. Second best team at outscoring from centre bounce clearances. So there's not one score source there that they have a little bit of a weakness in. And it's been a 10 or 11 week period, so we know about their ball movement, we know about how exciting they are.
Yeah.
But just looking at how you're getting your scores and how you're restricting the scores, to be top two in all four of the key indicators, probably, I think I was asked on this pod two weeks ago for a one-worded answer of can they win it, and I gave a 50-worded answer. I'll go back and go yes.
I was going to ask you
straight
again,
yes
so.
now. Yeah.
And you look at this team, and again, we have spoken about them in the past couple of weeks, and you look at the key position players they have there, and it just doesn't scream a premiership contender. But I think, when your system is working as well as it is, you've got all the players on the same page, and they're young and exciting, and, I say lack of KPPs, but then they've got a key position size, Josh Weddle, who's just becoming one of my favourite players in the competition.
He kicks 3 goals off half back.
And I think, I think the lack of key defender depth, if that's what you want to call it, actually plays to their strength. So Sydney, Brisbane, Port Adelaide, 3 of the most successful teams until the last 3 years, use corridor coming out of defensive 50. So the easiest way to go to your forward line is use the corridor, own the corridor. If you're good enough at it, you can own it. Hawks use the boundary line the second most of any team. So they're doing it a completely different way, where they're just spreading the field and making you run all over the field. And they, Carlton with 0 players left on the bench just could not go with them for the second half of the game at all. But they're not the only team to sort of struggle with that. So I think with Hawthorn, making the field big, spreading it out, you need your players to be able to move around the field. So you don't want big lumbering key position players in that team. I think their list clearly suits the way they're playing as well. So.
Yeah, for sure. And they're doing it at the right time of the year. I think it just proves that game plans are vital, because no disrespect to the Hawks and their key forwards being Marby Orchel and Cal Shadir, but then they come up against a team with the key forwards of Mackay and Curnow, but you can't really quantify confidence and system and momentum and that sort of youthful spirit that they're playing with. So as I said, probably the best team to watch alongside the Giants, who have also improved since their mid-season slump. Are they a real contender again?
Yeah, so round 6 to 16 was the slump you were talking about. They were 14th on the form ladder in that time, 3-7. They're the only team that's 6-0 since round 17. So everyone's at least dropped one game since round 17. We've spoken in the last recent weeks on the podcast about the runway and about getting your form right at this time of the year. Well, yes, they were quite lucky to escape with the win on the weekend, but they did it. They still found a way.
Well, they did that 2 weeks ago against Hawthorn as well.
And we spoke about them on the expected ladder. They're very lucky to be where they are, but they are where they are, and I think they're ready to grab it with 2 hands now. They're sort of getting their ball movement back. So you look at points from turnover, it's not a huge part of their game. They were 14th when they were struggling round 6 to 16 of raw points from turnover. They're gone to 12th since they've been doing well. So it's all come from their clearance work, their ability just to sort of pressure the ball carrier at the source and then just smash you out of there. So gone from 14th for points from stoppages from round 6 to 16 to number 1. Just to show you, turnover differential, they've gone from 13th to 12th for points scored from turnovers, so hasn't helped them get up. But stoppage differential, they've gone from 13th to second best team for outscoring from clearances. So it's really about stoppage, tsunami, and things like that. Their their ball movement's still sort of outside the top 8 or 9, so they don't want to play. They don't want to lose the inside 50 count too heavily in their games. That could be one of the things that they're susceptible to. But at the moment, it's all been done from stoppage and just that power work straight out of the midfield.
And players to come back in as well. You got Cumming and Cornelio and Kieran Briggs, Jake Riccardi.
They are primed to explode. Just like last year. This time last year, I think they really got on a run. They won a couple of finals. I think that they're in a really good position right now because last year they had Toby Green, who was the All-Australian captain. This year he's had a really poor season.
Yep.
And if he can get back to his best, he hasn't looked like it this year so far.
Well, that's the thing. They haven't needed him. And you've got guys like Aaron Cadman and Darcy Jones being the match winners on the weekend, two of the younger players in their team.
I think Jake Michaels might have had him in the top 3 of his best players coming into the season, Toby Green.
Number one.
He was number 1.
He was.
I think that if he
Which at the time was fair.
If he can get back to his ability, they're going to be very hard to stop in September.
How costly could their slow starts be? So they kicked 0-1 and were 30 points down against Brisbane. They kicked 1-6 in the first quarter against Hawthorn, 15 points down, 1 goal 2 and 27 points down against Melbourne the week before that. That's their last 3 weeks. They won all of those games, but do we think that can actually be costly for them?
No, I think because they won all those games, that's 3 great examples that you can draw back on, that you can go to win finals and go, hey, remember when this happened to us last time?
Yep.
So to be able to, if they had fallen short 3 times, that's when it's a problem. But because they've got 3 examples of overcoming that, I think it stays at a positive for me.
And then they kick 17 goals 6, 14 goals 5, 13 goals 7, and 13 goals 4. So accuracy absolutely does matter. I think they're, as you all say, in really good shape. But another team who had a mid-year lull, the Cats, they won their first 7. They then lost 6 of their last 7. They've now won 6 of their past 7. So their season's in real third blocks, you could say. Christian, what have they changed, or have they even adapted since the middle of the year slump?
Yeah, they have a little bit. So with Geelong, you can see with their points scored, ball movement, contest clearance, it's all been tinkered with, and the rankings might have changed a little bit. Even when they were 0 to 7, just to give you an example, they're 16th for contested possessions when they were undefeated at round 7, 17th for clearance differential. So they weren't relying on that crash and bash midfield. But then you look at the defensive stuff. So round 0 to 7, they were the 4th fewest points against and the 2nd hardest team to score per inside 50. So had all their setup right. We're almost set up to lose the clearance and contested possessions. Let's fold back. Let Tom Stewart intercept it and go from there. And
they lacked that midfield depth, so they probably needed to.
They did quite well. 8 to 15, as I said, contests and clearances, they were already in the negative. They improved slightly in those areas, but then their back 6, they were 17th for points against and the easiest team to score per inside 50. So from the 2nd hardest to the easiest team in that time, with just little changes amongst all the other numbers. Come back to round 16 to 22, they're back to being 4th for points against and back to being the hardest to score per inside 50. So it's all about how well Geelong defends is basically is the story of their season.